In the last 15 years or so, many American cities have had difficulties in maintaining a successful retail environment. Business owners in the city centers or the downtown areas have experienced some financial losses because of the city movement of the people out of the city and them into suburbs. In general, downtown areas just don't have that many residential areas. Not that many people live there. So what did city planner decided to about it? Well, one way they came up with some ways to attract more people to shop downtown was by creating pedestrian malls. Now, what is a pedestrian mall? It's a pretty simple concept, really. It is essentially an outdoor shopping area designed just for people on foot. And well, unlike many areas of shopping malls uh, uh, that are built in suburbs nowadays, these pedestrian malls are typically located in the downtown areas of the city. And there are features like white sidewalks, comfortable outdoor seating, and maybe even fountains, art. Fountains, art. There are variations on this model, of course, but the common denominators are always an idea of creating a shopping space that will get people to shop in the city without needing their cars. Not their cars. So I am sure you can see how heavy an area that off limits to mobile traffic would be ideal for heavily populated city where. So I'm sure you can see how heavy an area that off limits out to mobile traffic would be ideal for heavily populated city where well the street will otherwise be bustling with noise, unpleasant traffic congestion. Now, the concept, which originated in Europe, was adopted by American city planners in the late 1950s, and since then, a number of United States cities have created the pedestrian malls. So I'm sure you can see how heavy an area that off limits to automobile traffic would be ideal for heavily populated city areas. And many of them have been highly successful. So what does city planner learn about making these malls succeed? Well, there are two critical factors to consider when creating the pedestrian malls: location and design. Both of which are equally important, both of which これを both of them と言ったらいけないのかい Now let's start with location. In choosing a specific location for pedestrian mall, there are in fact two considerations: proximity to potential customers. That's we'll call it customers based on the accessibility to public transportation, which we will get into just a moment. Now, for a customer base, the most obvious example would be a large office building, since employees could theoretically go shopping after work or during their lunch hour, right? Another really good example is a convention center, which typically has a hotel and a large meeting space to draw visitors to the city for major business conferences and events. But ideally, the pedestrian mall will be used by local residents, not just people working in the city or visiting the area. So that's where access to the public transportation comes in. If the designer planned to locate the mall in central transportation hub, transportation hub, like bus terminal, a major train subway station, or they work with city officials to create sufficient parking areas not too far from the mall, which makes sense because people can drive into the mall area or then they need easy access to it. Okay, so that's location. But what about design? Well, design doesn't necessarily include things like sculptures or decorative wallways or even eye-catching window display, art. Although I will be the first to admit those things are aesthetically appealing, however, visually pleasing sights, while they're not a part of pedestrian mall design that matters than most. The key consideration is a compact and convenient layout, one which allows pedestrians to walk from one end of the mall to the other in just a few minutes, so they can get the major stores, restaurant, and other central places without having to take more than one or two turns. Now, this takes a careful and creative planning. But now, what if one ingredient to this planning recipe is missing? There could quite be possibly long-lasting effects. And I think a good example is the pedestrian mall in the Louisville, Kentucky, for instance. Now, when the Louisville Mall was built, it has a lot of visual appeal. It was attractively designed right in the small part of downtown, and it pretty much possessed all the other design elements for success. But now, here is my point about location comes into play. There wasn't a convention center around to help joining visitors, and was the only nearby hotel eventually closed down for that same reason. Well, you can imagine how this mode affected local and pedestrian mode business owners. So, sort of what we call it a chain reaction. It wasn't until a convention center and parking garage was built about decades later that mall started to be successful. Hmm.